So today I want to go over a pulverized build that also incorporates a landslide, and this is going to be after the most recent massive patch for Season 1 that nerfed basically everything in the game, but I think relative to all the other classes and builds, this build actually became a bit stronger. Now this build doesn't need any unique items to work, but it's going to be much stronger and much easier to use with Vasili's Prayer. This makes your earth skills also become werebear skills, and you gain some additional fortify. The fortify really doesn't matter, but the primary reason we're using this is so we can still use Earth Spike, which is our generator, and Earthen Bulwark when we're in Grizzly Rage. And with the Unstoppable from Grizzly Rage getting a massive nerf, being able to use Earthen Bulwark while in Grizzly Rage is now a lot more important. So Vasili's Prayer is going to make the build much stronger, but it's not fully needed to actually work. And I am also using Insatiable Fury, which did get buffed and now gives you +3 ranks to all werebear skills, so that's +3 ranks to literally all of our skills we're using. It used to be 2, and because this has physical power and overpower, this is now stronger relative to most of the other items in the game, and physical power did also get a buff. So this chest piece is going to be quite a lot stronger, but if you want to do higher tier stuff, I would still recommend using a legendary chest piece and getting all damage reduction rolls on it. And like most pulverized builds, our main aspect is Pulverize creates a shockwave that travels forward, dealing up to 150% of its damage to targets in the path. So now Pulverize is a massive AoE effect, but unlike most pulverized builds, we're also incorporating landslide into this build. That's why Pulverize is now on our necklace, because we're using a one-hander and an offhand, so we can fit in our 2 new landslide builds. The first one being Trample now summons 6 landslide pillars, dealing up to 80% of its normal damage, and Trample is also now nature magic and an earth skill, meaning it's going to get a lot of additional scaling. And the second being Landslide's Earth Pillars each strike a second time and deal an additional 12% bonus damage per hit. And as we go more into this build, you'll start to understand why Landslide fits so well into this build. Also, only 6% of people that watch my videos are subscribed, so make sure to subscribe if you want to keep up with all of my Diablo 4 content. Thank you. And next up we have our skill tree, starting with our generator of Earth Spike, then upgrade 1, it has a chance to stun. Then we're going down 5 points into Pulverize, our main damaging ability. Upgrade 1, if you say healthy for 12 seconds, your next Pulverize will overpower. Upgrade 2 causes Pulverize to make enemies deal 20% less damage. Then we're putting 5 points into Landslide, and this is because our Landslide aspects are based off of our actual landslide damage. So we're going to be getting some pretty massive damage increases through landslide, which is going to be cast from our trample. Then we're going down, putting 1 point into Earthen Bulwark. Upgrade 1 causes you to become unstoppable, and upgrade 2 causes Earthen Bulwark to explode when it expires. This can actually deal some decent damage because we get so much additional points into Earthen Bulwark, and especially with our critical strike damage scaling, this can actually help deal some additional damage, mostly against boss fights. Then we have 1 point into Debilitating Roar. Upgrade 1 causes it to fortify. Upgrade 2, it heals you for every second it's active. Just a massive damage reduction to all enemies in an area when we cast it. Then we're going down and taking Trample, which is how we're going to be casting Landslide. We're only going to be putting 1 point into this, but we have a ridiculous amount of additional points from other parts in the build. So Trample itself is actually going to deal quite a lot of damage. This also causes you to become unstoppable, which is pretty important after the Grizzly Rage nerfs. Upgrade 1 causes Trample to deal a lot more damage the less enemies hit. Upgrade 2 causes Trample to grant you 40 Spirit. This was also buffed in the patch, going from 20 up to 40. So this is actually pretty good for Spirit regeneration now. And then we're going down taking Grizzly Rage, a big part of the build. Massive damage increases, massive damage reduction. Upgrade 1 causes us to be unstoppable, but only for 6 seconds now. This was the nerf. It used to be for 100% of the duration. This means that our primary unstoppable is from our other abilities, because we're in Grizzly Rage for so long, and this only gives it at the start, so the first 6 seconds, which isn't very good because we want to be in Grizzly Rage all the time, so we're never using this for unstoppable. Then upgrade 2, it fortifies you every second it's active. Then our capstone is Earthen Might, has a 5% chance to both restore all of your spirit and cause your attacks to be guaranteed critical strikes for 5 seconds. The chances increase to 10% if it's a critical strike or if the target is stunned, immobilized, or knocked back. And us incorporating Landslide into this build actually massively increases the chance to proc Earthen Might, because we're using Trample, which itself has a chance to proc Earthen Might. It has its own lucky hit, but then the Landslide procs from Trample all have their own chance to also proc Earthern Might, and that's going to be based off of the lucky hit from Landslide itself. So we're going to be getting a lot more procs of Earthern Might than you would in a normal Pulverized build. Then next up we have our passives, 1 into Heart of the Wild so we can get 3 into Abundance so our basic skills generate more spirit, and I currently took all of my points out of Wild Impulses, which your core skills cost more spirit but deal more damage, and I have +3 to this on my necklace, and I took the 3 points out to put it in other areas, and because I didn't want my Pulverize costing even more spirit, and I haven't made up my mind if I want to put more points into Wild Impulses, if I want to get a better rolled necklace to not have the +3 points of Wild Impulses, but right now I'm thinking having the +3 to Wild Impulses on my necklace and taking all the points out of it might actually be better just because we get to use those 3 points mainly to put more into Landslide, so I think that may actually end up being more damage. Then 2 into Predatory Instinct, increase critical strike chance to close enemies, 3 into Iron Fur so you take reduced damage while in Werebear, 1 into Ancestral Fortitude to get Vigilance. When you use a defensive, you gain damage reduction for 6 seconds. Then we're going down taking Nature's Reach, increase damage to distant enemies. This is doubled if they're slowed, stunned, immobilized, or knocked back. So this is going to be procced basically 100% of the time for some pretty big damage increases. Then 3 into Crushing Earth. Earth skills deal increased damage to slowed, stunned, immobilized, or knocked back. All enemies we're damaging are going to be slowed, so a massive damage increase. Then we only have 1 point into Safeguard, and this is critical strikes with Earth skills fortify you for 2% of your base life. And I took these points out because you basically don't need more points into this. This and the Fortify from our Grizzly Rage keeps you 100% fortified all the time. And this does proc on every single enemy. So if I pulverize once into 100 enemies and half of them get crit, it'll just 100% fortify you. This still generates ridiculous amounts of fortify even at 1 point. Then 3 into Stone Guard. When you fortify over 50% of your max life, you deal more Earth skill damage for some pretty big damage increases again. 3 into Defiance. Nature skills deal more damage to elites. 2 into Circle of Life. Any skills that cost spirit heal you for 2% of your max life. So anytime we pulverize, we get some healing. Then 3 into Natural Disaster. Our skills deal more damage to vulnerable enemies. Next up, we have our Spirit Boons. First, for damage reduction from elites. Second, increased critical strike chance. Third, Calamity for increased duration for Grizzly Rage. Then we have Obsidian Slam. Every 20th kill will cause your next Earth skill to overpower. And another pretty big buff to this build is Pulverize won't use 2 overpower effects at once anymore. So we have the overpower effect for one of our upgrades from Pulverize. So if you stay healthy for 12 seconds, it's a guaranteed overpower. And we have Obsidian Slam. Before, if you had both of these effects procced at the same time, one Pulverize would use both of them, wasting one of them. Now, Pulverize won't do that. So we got a pretty big buff in that area. And then our last Spirit Boons combo for the Storm. Nature skills have up to a 10% chance to reduce the cooldown of your ultimate by 2 seconds. Next up, we have our Paragon Board. We're primarily going to be going over the board selection and the glyphs, but there'll be a link in the description to a build planner so you can follow every exact point I'm using. The starting board, we're using Spirit. This actually got a pretty big buff. It used to only affect core skills, but now it just gives you increased critical strike damage. Then the secondary is critical strikes increase the damage enemies take from you by 2% up to 12%. So just some pretty big damage increases. First board we're taking is Survival Instinct. You deal up to 50% increased damage for every 1% difference in life percent between you and the enemy. So if they're 50%, you're at 100, they're taking 50% more damage from you. Then the glyph we're taking is Earth and Sky. So we get pretty big bonuses to all magic nodes within range. Then Earth skills deal 10% increased damage to crowd controlled or vulnerable enemies. And you want to take basically all of the magic nodes within range. But one of the really good reasons you take these type of glyphs is because the magic nodes that give you stats give you a lot more stats. So I have 2 points into the dexterity nodes here because I need more dexterity to get the secondary effects of other rare glyphs. If you don't need the extra dexterity, just take these points out. If you need more intelligence, put the points into the intelligence nodes. Very good for a lot of additional stats. Then we're going to the left, taking Earthern Devastation. Earth skills deal 30% increased damage to crowd controlled enemies. Then we're taking the Werebear glyph, increased damage while in Werebear, take reduced damage while in Werebear. Then we're going to the left, taking Ancestral Guidance. After spending 75 spirit, you deal 30% increased damage for 5 seconds. This will be procced quite a lot of the time, but another big reason we're going over to this side, taking this board is because of this rare node and some of the magic nodes, primarily for the +2 spirit on kill. Then 2 of the magic nodes also give an additional +1 spirit on kill. So just from these nodes, we get +4 spirit on kill. That's pretty massive for our spirit generation. Then we're going back over to the right, going up. We're taking the inner beast board, but not taking the node. And the glyph we're taking is Undaunted. Increase damage while fortified, take reduced damage while fortified. And this is going to be one of the biggest damage increases for glyphs. Then we're going to the left of that, taking Constricting Tendrils, but not taking the node itself. Then we're taking the Exploit glyph. We're primarily taking this because when an enemy is damaged by you, they become vulnerable for 3 seconds. Has a 20-second cooldown per enemy. You want the secondary effect. This is the primary way we apply vulnerable to enemies. And if you're a lower level character, take the Exploit glyph first. Take it on your starter board, and you can get enough dexterity to get the secondary effect of the Exploit glyph, with that Exploit glyph only being at level 1. And then we have our uniques and legendary aspects. We already went over Vasili's Prayer, not fully required, but very good for the build. You're definitely going to want this. Then Insatiable Fury was recently buffed in multiple ways, so it's very good, especially for speedrunning. If you want to do higher difficulty content, you're going to want a legendary chest piece with all damage reduction on it and another defensive aspect. Then, as we mentioned, our main aspect is Pulverize Catches Shockwave, dealing a ton of additional damage, hitting the whole screen with a Pulverize. And then on our rings, we have Pulverize is also now an Earth skill, and after casting Pulverize, it leaves a small AoE effect on the ground. This is primarily so Pulverize becomes an Earth skill, meaning it also now has a bunch of additional scaling. Our other ring is for Landslide. Landslide's pillars each strike a second time and deal an additional 12% damage. Gonna massively increase our Landslide damage. Then on our gloves, increase the duration of Grizzly Rage by 5 seconds, and critical strikes while in Grizzly Rage give us stacking critical strike damage. This is one of the main damaging effects for the entirety of the build. I think you can get like 1000% critical strike damage with this, and this is also one of the reasons I originally want to put Landslide into these builds, because once you use Trample, it's going to spawn all these landslides that also all hit twice because of our other aspect. And this can cover an entire screen, meaning that it's going to hit a ton of enemies multiple times that all can be crits, meaning you're going to stack up your critical strike damage incredibly quickly. That was one of the main reasons I wanted to put it in the build, just so it could help us stack up our critical strike damage. It still does that very well, but Landslide ended up doing quite a lot of damage as well. Then on our one-handed weapon, Trample now summons 6 landslides, all doing 80% damage, and now Trample is a nature, magic, and earth skill, so it has more scaling. Then on our offhand, your core skills deal up to 40% increased damage based on your fortify. This is multiplicative, so this is a pretty big damage increase. And having an offhand also gives us some pretty big cooldown reduction, which allows us to cast Trample much more, meaning cooldown is a bit more important for this build than it was before. Then on our boots, damage from earth skills slow enemies by 50% for 5 seconds. We don't care about the roll on this. We primarily just want enemies to be slowed, which procs a ton of our other effects. Then on our legs, we're still using Disobedience, which is armor stacking. This was massively nerfed. It used to stack up to 50% increased armor. Now it's only 30, but it's still one of the best defensive aspects in the game. Now, if you didn't read the patch notes from that recent patch that nerfed basically everything in the game, a ton of stats were nerfed. Basically all defensive stats were nerfed, vulnerability was nerfed, crit damage was nerfed, tons of stats were nerfed. So I am not sure what are the best stats to go. I'm basically still just going off of the best in slot stats pre this patch. It's going to take quite a lot of time to figure out what the best stats are now, but until that's figured out community wide, you can still just go for the stats we were going before that patch. So on our gloves, ranks to Pulverize, critical strike chance, and then lucky a chance would be probably a better roll for this. And also this has overpower damage on it. Even though it's a bad roll, overpower might be much better now, because overpower was one of the things that was not nerfed. On your legs, you want all damage reduction. Basically all these damage reductions were nerfed, but with that being said, damage reduction while injured was not nerfed. I don't have that on my legs, but you should get that on your legs. Damage reduction while injured is probably going to be one of the best damage reductions in the game now. Same with on the boots. You can get damage reduction while injured. I don't have that on my boots either, but again, try to get those on your boots. Then you want move speed, spirit cost reduction, and then potentially willpower could be a good roll, but dodge chance would probably be the 4th stat you would want. On my weapon, I have damage to close, which I would definitely want to change out, maybe damage to distant, or maybe actually overpower damage now. Then willpower may not be a good stat anymore because that was also nerfed, so main stat on weapons was pretty heavily nerfed, so probably a different roll to that. Vulnerable damage was nerfed. nerfed. Core skill damage was not nerfed, so that's still a best roll. Not exactly sure what the best rolls are going to be for these now. Then on our offhand, critical strike chance, lucky hit chance, cooldown reduction, even though it was nerfed, it's still going to be one of the best rolls on here. Damage reduction while fortified, still going to be one of the best rolls, even though that was nerfed as well. Then on our necklace, I think this is one of the spots I probably want to change up. Spirit cost reduction is going to be good, but you're also going to want movement speed, cooldown reduction, and like I mentioned, I'm not sure if rank so out. Impulse will be good, so I can get the 3 ranks, take my points out of the skill tree and put them in other areas. That may still be the best. I have ranks to all race skills, which does help our trample. Trample can actually deal some good damage, but movement speed or cooldown would still be better. Then on our rings, lucky hit chance, critical strike chance, vulnerable damage, and max life probably still going to be the best. Even though vulnerable damage got some pretty big nerfs, those are probably still going to be the 4 best rolls. But that's the entirety of this build. But like I mentioned, with all of these most recent nerfs, I think relative to everything else, this build is actually stronger than it used to be. And it plays exactly the same as other pulverized builds, except trample is going to be used more as a combat damage dealing ability and less like a movement ability. This deals a lot of damage itself, and it's going to be spawning all the landslides. You also want to be using this early to keep it on cooldown and to stack up our critical strike damage in Grizzly Rage, because landslides hit so many targets and hit them multiple times. But that's all I want to go over, so thanks for watching.